This is the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Kendall of the notaballerina.com travel blog. Every episode, I'll share travel tales from several fellow travel lovers, and together we hope to entertain and inspire you, remind you of some of your own great travel experiences, and encourage you to hit the road again soon. Hello and welcome to episode 383 of the Thoughtful Travel Podcast. Today we're talking about small connections and big memories. Basically, stories of how we meet people on the road, how we connect with someone in a new place we're visiting. It might be fleeting, it might be longer, but often these are the memories that really, really last. I'd like to pay my respects to the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, where I'm recording this podcast today before we start. Now, we really often remember these people and moments of connection, whether they're big or small, from our travels. And I have talked before in other episodes about many of these little moments or bigger moments from my travels over the years. But for today, I tried to recall some of the smaller connections that I wouldn't have mentioned. In fact, to do that, I looked through some of my old travel diaries to jog my memory. So you can imagine that was a fabulous rabbit hole to wander down. For example, I had forgotten that I had a spate of meeting super lovely people when I arrived in Estonia for the first time, which I was coming on a bus from St. Petersburg, crossing the border from Russia into Estonia, into the town of Narva, way back in 2003. But luckily, my diary jogged my memory, and this is what I'd written. I said, on the bus, we'd been talking to a really interesting Australian guy whose father is Estonian. His half-sister is a famous Estonian playwright. Now, I wish I'd noted his name or hers, but we didn't have internet in our pockets back then, so I probably never even remembered to look them up. But anyway, we found the tourist info centre in the main street of Narva, and we were very enthusiastically welcomed. From Australia, it is so far. And we were laden with maps and info. The woman, Yelena, checked with the hostel that they had a room for us. On the way to the hostel, a woman named Tatiana started chatting to us. She lived near the hostel, so took us there. She invited us to stay in her flat, but not until Wednesday as she's working tomorrow, but we'll probably go on to Tallinn on Wednesday. Now, it's over 20 years ago that I wrote this and that I experienced this, but literally as soon as I read that, I can picture those people that I met then like I met them yesterday. It's funny, isn't it? It doesn't take much to remember. And having just come from Russia where we did meet a few surly people, one of those in a moment, it was a really contrasting thing to experience this very, very friendly Estonian community in Narva. So I guess that's why I particularly remembered them. So yes, speaking of Russia, I flipped backwards a bit in that diary and I found myself crossing Russia on the Trans-Siberian, and especially noting that on the trains there was a lot of very surly, grumpy provodnitsas, the women who were in charge of each car in the train. But on the stretch between Irkutsk and Yekaterinburg, I did note in my diary a Russian guy whose job was selling snacks on the train, and he was a delight. So I wrote, the guy selling snacks on the train is nice and speaks German. Yesterday, he asked if we had any Australian coins because he collects them. We didn't, but gave him some Japanese ones this morning. It's a small memory, but I do remember him and I wonder what he's doing now and how many different kinds of coins he's ended up with. I know on the trains back then, the trains we used, there were very few foreigners. So, I guess he might have still come across a few to increase his coin collection. But yeah, one of those little small moments that does make an impact. Now, I have lots of stories from guests today that are kind of along these lines as well. I'm starting off with Eryn Gordon, and Eryn was on a solo trip in Chiang Mai in Thailand, and she walked into a bar.
So one night I was in Chiang Mai and I was looking for just like a late nightcap, basically, like just looking for a beer. And I ended up walking down this kind of empty side street and found this bar with a bunch of people in it. So I thought, oh, that looks great. I walk in and there's like 20 or 30 people in there. And as soon as I walked in, everybody just stopped conversation and stared at me. It was like in a movie. It was super weird, you know, and I was kind of like frozen there for a moment, like, oh my goodness, what did I do? And so I'm kind of slowly walking backwards to the door, being like, sorry. And then someone was like, no, stay. And then they just like put me into a chair with a beer. And turned out I walked into somebody's like soft open for their bar. And it was all of their like close friends and family. And they just kind of saw me and they were like, well, she's definitely not from around here. And it was kind of like walking into like somebody's family picnic in a way. Like everybody knew everybody there. And so it was just this like really wholesome moment where I ended up going to a place that I had totally felt like in that moment, oh my goodness, I don't belong here. But just with a little bit of extra time, I had this opportunity to connect with some people who lived in Chiang Mai and were really, really welcoming. It was just a wonderful experience. I ended up making a couple of friends that night. And one of the people that I had been talking to at that bar, it was a couple, and they ended up bringing me to this incredible lakeside restaurant the following day. It was like an hour in the jungle, and there was just no way I would have heard about it or gotten there if I didn't just walk into this bar and serendipitously meet them. And it was a super cool experience. So I highly recommend trying to scope out a soft open for a bar next time you go to a new place.
It sounds like something that's hard to do, but if you get there, embrace it.
Totally. Yes, totally. If it's your moment, seize it. So.
Oh, I love that. There's so you were traveling solo at this time?
Yes, I was. I was in Thailand for about a month, and it was right after actually I'd been living for a time in Asia. I was a teacher, and I just thought, well, you know, this is my opportunity. I'm going to go try to travel as much as I can. So I tacked on a few extra months into my journey before heading back home.
I mean, I've been to Thailand quite a few times because it's nice and close to Perth. Of all the places, you know, the people are so friendly and welcoming. You know, I can imagine that walking into a bar on your own in Thailand is much less daunting than in many parts of the world anyway.
100% agree. I guess it's a bit of a stereotype, but it's like the people in Thailand are so unbelievably friendly. And I think that there is some truth to that. I don't think I had met a single unpleasant or unfriendly Thai person when I was traveling there. And, you know, again, I generally try not to generalize, but I would say in this situation, it was really such a eye-opening experience to meet many people, not just one or two, but many people who were like, you're not from around here. I'm going to show you all the cool stuff that my country, city, town has to offer. And it was a wild experience, you know, especially coming from New England where people are generally, again, not like that. But so
it is always harder to walk solo into anywhere, I think, especially when you're first doing it. But it can really pay off, can't it? Funnily enough, Eryn's story reminded me of when I was a kid and we accidentally walked into what I would now call the soft open of a Subway store here. My family and we didn't realise that it wasn't open. Same scenario, lots of people in there, but when we got there, we realised they were all friends and family. But same thing, they welcomed us, and I always remembered that Subway as a lovely, lovely spot. So there you go. Now, my next guest is Amy Willis. Amy actually had a really interesting year not too long ago. She spent a year trying out digital nomad life through a program called Remote Year, where they spend a month or so at a time in different locations, kind of as a group. She'll be telling us more about that in an upcoming episode. But yeah, as she was moving location every month or so, she said it was moving a little bit often to make close friends, but she did have one trick where she got to meet some locals in most places that she went.
I did join this boxing gym, and I was the only girl, of course, and I didn't understand their Spanish. My Spanish is terrible. And so we were doing drills and stuff, and they're like hitting me pretty hard because they're just like,
they're not used to having any girls there either. So
yeah, or they're just like, she's a boxer just like us, you know, like we're going to treat her the same. Yeah, and so I had to like just try to fake my way through a lot of those classes and just like basically get beat up by guys every time I was there.
Where was that?
Nothing. That was Buenos Aires.
Right.
Yeah, but, like, they loved me so much and they respected me so much because I was just in there working with them and
Mm.
not even speaking their language, but I was still like, I know how to, dip a punch and slip a punch and punch back. So, stuff like that was just kinda interesting to just, like, I don't know, just kinda be a fly on the wall in a new place and just learn by watching and demonstrating but I wouldn't say I've made, like, any long-lasting friendships from
Sure.
there because,
Yeah.
it just wasn't really enough time.
So, yeah, joining a gym or just joining a few classes while you're in a place is another way to find some local connections. And if you're staying a bit longer, maybe even some friendships, but just, a way to meet like-minded people as well. I loved how, how Amy was welcomed because she was, up for the boxing. Now, my next guest is Bianca Rappaport, and she lives a nomadic life doing a lot of house sitting around the world. And I was particularly curious to ask her how she makes connections and friendships as she travels.
Yeah, I think that there are so many ways to find solutions to building community when you're a nomad. The first one is slow your roll. Just slow down and be able to spend more time in places. If you are able to, if you have that type of opportunity as a nomad and you aren't overcommitting yourself to being in a new country every single week, being able to slow down just allows you the time, the space, the energy, and capacity to be able to make meaningful relationships with people. So I definitely identify as a slow mad more than a digital nomad. I really just try to go as slow as I possibly can in each place to really, really get to know the people, the places, the environment, the land that I'm on, whose land I'm on, and to really get to know those on a level, on a deeper level. One thing that has been really helpful for me as well is splitting my time between new places and places that I really, really love and have been to several times. So by being able to return to the same place over again, I'm able to just hit the ground running. I already have my friends. I know where my favorite shops and spots are. So I'm able to go to my, favorite locally owned vegan restaurant the moment that I arrive and say hi to the owners there. I'm able to meet up with my friends. So just having a balance between novelty and familiarity gives a sense of grounding for me and balance for sure. Another thing is that I'm not so great in like really big groups, but I'm happy to go on mini friendship dates with people. So I've used apps like Bumble BFF, for example, to be able to go and just like reach out to people and say, I'm walking the dog today. I walk the dog every day at 9:00 and I go on this route. If you'd like to join me for a walk, like we could just have a walk and talk and get to know people. And just by putting myself out there and going on these like mini friend dates, that's how I've been able to actually build some really great relationships. So just by putting yourself out there, it can be really, really helpful.
Yes, I love people and I'm usually pretty good at finding new people wherever I am because I just love to talk to anyone. But I know for many people it is much harder to do that. But you're right, just taking that brave step of putting yourself out there and seeing what happens. And if you don't get along, you never have to see the person again and it's fine. But you probably come across a lot of really cool people that way as well. I love it.
Yes, absolutely. And it's really interesting who you come across after many years. Like one example is I would go to this monthly eco market in Spain. And I went one year, I think in 2021, I went to this eco market and there happened to be a workshop about composting. And the people that were running the workshop own a composting type of company. And they basically gave me worms that I was able to use to have my own little composting setup at my house sit, which was wonderful. And I never thought that I would see them again. Lo and behold, last month, I ended up signing myself up for a 15-hour free urban agriculture course. And the same people who had given me those worms for composting years ago were actually running this course. So I was able to actually spend more time with them and really dive deep into soil health, community gardens, and being able to connect with people that way too.
What a lovely surprise.
Yeah, like you just never know who you're going to bump into on the road as well.
Yeah, the world is much smaller than we think.
For sure.
I really do love return visits to a place for lots and lots of reasons. but being able to reconnect with people is definitely a great one. Something I've done when returning to places that I've lived as I've been teaching over the years in Japan or Germany or Slovakia, and being able to meet up with those people again is heaps and heaps and heaps of fun. Speaking of return visits, my next guest is Heidi Brown, and she actually discusses connecting with people on repeat visits to her very favourite place, Rome.
Rome is my favorite place in the world. I went there for the first time in 2013. And I wrote this new travel memoir. It's called The Map I Draw. And it begins and ends in Rome, because Rome is, as I said, I went there for the first time in 2013. I've probably been there 15 times since then. And the first time I went, it was just so overwhelming in terms of the history. I remember turning the corner and hearing this thunder of water crashing, and it was the Trevi Fountain. And I was almost blinded by the white of the marble and the glistening that people throw coins in the Trevi Fountain. It's just very overwhelming in terms of the ancient historical nature of the city, but also how modern it is in terms of, I like street art and graffiti. So you'll have like this 2,000-year-old column or statue or sculpture right next to this really cool piece of street art, or some musician, again, playing my YouTube music. It's overwhelming. I'll be sitting in front of the Pantheon, looking at the letters etched across the top of the Pantheon in like ancient Latin, and there'll be a musician playing a U2 song or a Coldplay song or an Oasis song. And then there'll be this amazing piece of street art or like a street performer. It overwhelms me every time. And I love getting lost in Rome. I never feel afraid. I feel like you can walk and walk and walk and constantly discover new layers of history, culture, art. I love the language. I try to speak Italian when I'm there, so I can feel like a local, even though they immediately know I'm American. But we try.
Sure.
I also get my hair. I have hair appointments in Rome to feel like a local. So I will like wait and wait and wait as long as humanly possible and not get my hair cut in New York, and I will go and get it cut in Rome, because it's such a learning experience to have to make the appointment.
Yeah.
Walk in there. They all know each other. They don't. But that's a place that they've started to recognize me, because I'm sure they're thinking, who's this crazy American woman who comes in here, twice a year or whatever. But it's part of my ritual now to feel like this city is part of me.
Mm-hmm,
and same thing with the exercise. I love to walk by the Tiber River and the bridges. There's a little there's staircases that go down to this platform. It's called the Lungo Tevere, and you can walk along right on the river level. And in the summer they have festivals down there and different barges with bars and restaurants and things. But in the winter, there's nothing down there. It's just an exercise path. But you see all the locals exercising, and you're walking under these ancient bridges. And then I finish my walk and I go up to this little coffee shop that's perched right up there, and you stand up. You don't sit down. There's nowhere to sit. So you stand like the locals and you order. Of course, I still order my American coffee with, a side of milk, but haven't quite graduated to espresso. And I order a spremuta, which is a freshly squeezed orange juice. And the gentlemen talk to me like they know me, and it's just wonderful.
Yeah, when the local cafe owners and hairdressers start to recognise you, I think that's a great sign you are making some local connections. I actually remember nearly a decade ago now, on an episode about slow travel, one of the very first episodes I did, a guest told me that his definition of slow travel is if you go to the same coffee shop or cafe a few times and the barista recognises you, or even better, knows your name or knows your regular order. Sometimes that can just take 3 or 4 days of going to the same place. I've thought about that so often over the years as a way to think about traveling more slowly. And just a few months back in Seoul, we started to make that kind of connection with this older Korean woman who worked the evening shift at the convenience store right across from our guest house. And there weren't heaps of tourists staying in the area, so I guess we stood out. And it went from, just smiles the first night, we're friendly, and she was friendly. But then as we returned again and again, we would, go for probably a nightly snack, maybe every evening, or we would be buying our breakfast for the next day there. I'm not, I've got lots of excuses. I just love convenience stores. We don't have the same here. Anyway, we kept returning and we started to kind of chat a little bit more. I remember the very first time she spoke to us more than, how much or, do you want a bag? She asked if we spoke Korean. in Korean, but I was like, oh, yes, I actually understand what you're saying, except my answer is no, we don't speak Korean. But then the next day she, maybe had thought about it some more and had a few more English words, and she asked if the person I was with was my son. He was, and she commented on how tall he was, etc. And yeah, just a little bit more connection each day. It made me really wish that I knew more Korean and that I had, you can't learn every language, can you? But it was really nice to be able to just have those little chats, and yeah, very sweet connection. Actually, one last story. Because of thinking of Heidi's hairdresser, I found this by chance in my journal while I was looking for the other stories I mentioned at the top of the episode. And it's about a trip to a Japanese hairdresser somewhere in Nara Prefecture, probably in Nara City, I think, but for some reason I did not note this, but it was also in 2003. And so my diary says, I had a very interesting experience at a perm cut house, the cheaper end of the hair salon market for sure. As soon as I walked in, I got shepherded into a shampoo chair, amongst all the screaming "Irashaimase," "Onegaishimasu," and "Otsukaresama deshita" of the 20 or so staff there and maybe 8 customers. Then my order of a shampoo and cut was announced loudly to all. The screaming continued. I began to think I was in an izakaya, that's a casual restaurant, kind of like a pub. It was all a bit surreal, but I got out of there with a good short haircut. So I actually remember having quite, different haircuts in Japan. Some of them were very luxurious and with very long scalp massages, which were fabulous. But I didn't have too many haircuts. I had pretty long hair then, didn't need it cut too often. And but obviously at the perm cut house, the the staff to customer ratio was a bit extreme, and there was a lot of shouting going on. So there you go. They didn't get to know me regularly the way that Heidi's have in Rome. Anyway, I hope that these little stories and anecdotes make you also think of some of the connections and people that you've seen, whether briefly or a little longer, on your travels over the years. I think that the people are the number one favourite thing, and they're always what's unique. No one else has had those experiences, and that's what makes your trip memorable in a different way. So I really like to think about these connections and also kind of keep that in mind to try and foster them even more when we travel, if we can. So thank you so much for listening to episode 383 of the Thoughtful Travel podcast. Shout out to my fabulous guests. Firstly, I chatted with Eryn Gordon, and you can find out more about what Eryn's up to on her website, Earth to Editorial, at earthtoeditorial.com. And I'll leave a link in the show notes to Eryn's recent TEDx talk on what it means to be a good traveller. Also, big thanks to Amy Willis from Kerr and Downey. More about their tours at kerrdowney.com, or follow Amy on Instagram at Amy N. Willis. Thanks also to Bianca Rappaport at wanderwell.club. That's her website, and her Instagram is the same, Wanderwell Club. Thanks also, last but definitely not least, to Heidi Brown. Her website is heidikristenbrown.com, and her memoir, The Map I Draw, a memoir of travel as a passport to self, is out now, and I'll leave a link to that. If you want to know about other stories of meeting people or connecting with locals when we travel, there's so many episodes. To name a few, episode 296 about connecting with local people, 315 about meeting locals, and 336 meeting interesting people on your travels, and more. There's lots and lots, because people often tell me stories that turn out to be, really, the main point is about the people. Even that might not be how they start off, but that's how they end up, because, people are important. Please come and tell us your own stories in the Facebook or LinkedIn groups for Thoughtful Travellers. And remember the Thoughtful Travellers newsletter, thoughtfultravel.substack.com. All of these links are in the show notes. And so for this episode, you can find the show notes at notaballerina.com/383. As always, thank you so much for listening. This has been another episode of the Thoughtful Travel podcast. Show notes and other information are at notaballerina.com/podcast. Join me again soon for another chat about why we travel. Bye for now.